Windows. Windows is Microsoft's desktop operating system, first released in 1985 and still the most dominant OS on the planet. It currently runs on over 1.4 billion active devices worldwide. The shift between versions tells its own story. Windows 10's free ride finally ended when Microsoft cut official support in October 2025. That forced a massive wave of upgrades. By February 2026, Windows 11 had jumped to 72.57% of the Windows market, up from just 50% in December 2025. For the first time in history, Windows 10 is genuinely dying. Its core strength has always been compatibility. Windows supports more software than any other desktop OS: games, enterprise tools, creative apps, legacy business systems. If a program exists, it almost certainly runs on Windows. Hardware support is equally broad. Nearly every GPU, peripheral, and accessory is built with Windows in mind first. The trade-offs are real. Windows is the most targeted OS for malware and ransomware. Microsoft has been aggressive about pushing ads, AI features, and OneDrive integration directly into the desktop, even without asking. And a security update in late 2025 caused game performance to drop by 50% in some titles, which did not go unnoticed. macOS. macOS is Apple's desktop operating system, running exclusively on Mac hardware, MacBooks, iMacs, and the Mac Studio lineup. It launched in 2001 and has been steadily refined into one of the most polished desktop experiences available. The current version is macOS Tahoe, released in September 2025. Its predecessor, macOS Sequoia, introduced iPhone mirroring, the ability to fully control your iPhone from your Mac using just the keyboard and trackpad. Tahoe continues pushing Apple Intelligence features deeper into the OS, though most of them require an M1 chip or newer. Intel Mac users are officially being left behind. In the US, macOS holds roughly 29% of the desktop market, meaning about 1 in 3 American computer users is on a Mac. Globally, it sits closer to 7%, reflecting its premium pricing and Apple hardware exclusivity. Among professionals, the numbers are striking. Roughly 87% of engineering professionals globally say macOS is their primary platform. It's the dominant choice in video editing, music production, and design, and Apple Silicon has only strengthened that position. The obvious downside is cost. You're paying Apple's hardware premium with no alternative, and customization is limited compared to Windows or Linux. Linux. Linux isn't a single operating system, it's a family. Built on a common kernel created by Linus Torvalds in 1991, it comes in dozens of distributions: Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, Arch, and many more. It's free, open source, and maintained by a global community. The desktop numbers have been quietly climbing. Linux desktop market share reached 4.7% globally in 2025, a 70% increase from just 2.76% in 2022. In the US, it crossed the 5% threshold for the first time in June 2025. India leads all major economies at over 16% Linux adoption on the desktop. A big driver of that growth? Windows 10's end of support. Millions of users with older hardware that can't meet Windows 11's requirements turn to Linux instead of buying new machines. Valve's Steam Deck also pushed gaming on Linux into the mainstream, with Linux hitting 5.33% of Steam users by early 2026. On servers, Linux is not a niche, it is the standard. It powers 44.8% of all server operating systems, 59% of websites with an identifiable OS, and 100% of the world's top 500 supercomputers. Ubuntu leads web server deployments. Red Hat Enterprise Linux leads managed enterprise environments. The learning curve is real for new users. Some hardware still requires manual setup. But the gap between Linux and mainstream desktop use has narrowed more in the last 3 years than in the previous 20. Chrome OS. Chrome OS is Google's operating system, launched in 2011 and built around the Chrome browser. It powers Chromebooks, affordable devices designed for cloud-based work and everyday web use. It's intentionally lightweight, fast to boot, and nearly immune to traditional viruses. Chrome OS holds about 1.83% of the global desktop market. Small, but concentrated where it matters most. It dominates classrooms. Chromebooks are cheap to buy, cheap to manage at scale, and practically indestructible in the hands of students. For browsing, email, Google Docs, and video calls, it handles everything without friction. For anything beyond that, the limitations are significant. You're dependent on internet connectivity, local storage is minimal, native Windows or Mac OS apps don't run, Android apps work through the Play Store, but the experience is inconsistent. Google has also been expanding Chrome OS into lightweight enterprise environments, where web-first workflows fit the model perfectly. Chrome OS is the right tool for light, cloud-first computing, especially in education. Android. Android is Google's mobile operating system, and by raw numbers, it's the most widely used OS on Earth. As of late 2025, Android holds 72.77% of the global smartphone market and runs on approximately 3.9 billion active devices worldwide. It's open source, which means any manufacturer can use it, customize it, and ship it. That's why a Samsung phone and a stock Android Pixel look completely different, even though they share the same foundation. This openness is Android's biggest strength. You get real flexibility. Sideload apps, change default apps, manage your file system directly, customize the interface at a depth iOS simply doesn't allow. The hardware range is unmatched. Android runs on everything from $50 budget phones to $1,400 flagships. The downside is fragmentation. Software updates depend on your manufacturer, not Google. Security patches can arrive months late, or not at all, on budget and mid-range devices. Android 15 sat at just 38.7% of active Android devices 12 months after its release, compared to iOS 18's 84.2% on iPhone. That update gap is significant. If variety, flexibility, and hardware choice matter more than uniformity, Android is your platform. iOS. iOS is Apple's mobile operating system, exclusive to iPhone and iPad. It holds 28.2% of the global smartphone market, but in the United States it flips. iOS leads with around 58 to 60% market share against Android's 40%. The update story is iOS's most underrated advantage. iOS 18 reached 84.2% of active iPhones 12 months after release. On Android, the two most recent versions combined still hadn't hit 70%. Apple supports iPhones with software updates for 5 to 6 years, something no Android manufacturer comes close to matching consistently. Security patches are pushed simultaneously to every supported device the moment Apple releases them. Privacy controls have also grown substantially. App tracking transparency, on-device processing for sensitive data, and tighter permissions across the board. Despite having fewer than 30% of global users, iOS captures 64.2% of all consumer app spending worldwide. Average iOS user spent $63 on apps in 2025. Average Android user spent $13. That revenue split shapes how developers prioritize platforms. The trade-offs are well known. Deep customization isn't really possible. You're locked into Apple's ecosystem for cloud storage, messaging, and app distribution, though the EU's Digital Markets Act has begun forcing some of that open. For users who want consistent updates, strong security, and long-term support, iOS delivers without compromise. UNIX. UNIX is the origin point of modern computing. Developed at Bell Labs in 1969, it established the architectural principles that nearly every operating system since has borrowed: the hierarchical file system, user permissions, process management, and the command line interface. You will almost certainly never install Unix directly, but its influence is everywhere. macOS is a certified Unix system. Linux was built to replicate Unix behavior. Android carries Unix principles at its core. Windows has absorbed many Unix concepts over the decades, including its own Linux subsystem. Today, Unix survives in specialized enterprise and telecommunications environments, where stability measured in decades matters more than modern features. Some Unix systems running today have operated continuously for over 20 years without a restart. The phrase, "everything is a file," the design idea that devices, processes, and network connections are all treated like files, originated in Unix. That concept shaped how software is built across virtually every platform. Unix is the foundation everything else was built on. BSD, Berkeley Software Distribution, started as a Unix variant developed at UC Berkeley in the late 1970s. It evolved into its own family, with 3 major active branches: FreeBSD, OpenBSD, and NetBSD. The real-world footprint of BSD is far larger than most people realize. Netflix uses FreeBSD to power its entire OpenConnect CDN, the global infrastructure that delivers video to hundreds of millions of subscribers. A single FreeBSD-based Netflix server can push over 90 gigabits per second of TLS-encrypted streaming traffic. Sony's PlayStation 3, 4, 5, and Vita all run operating systems built on FreeBSD. WhatsApp's back-end infrastructure runs on FreeBSD. The permissive BSD license means companies don't have to disclose they're using it, so the real list is almost certainly much longer. OpenBSD is built around a single philosophy: security above everything else. It's widely considered the most rigorously audited open-source operating system in existence, and it forms the foundation for OpenSSH, the tool used to securely connect to remote servers across virtually all of the internet. NetBSD is optimized for portability. It runs on more hardware architectures than almost any other OS, from modern servers to decades-old hardware. macOS itself pulls heavily from BSD. Its networking stack and many core command line utilities trace directly back to FreeBSD. BSD isn't for general consumers. It's for infrastructure, security research, and environments where correctness and reliability are non-negotiable. BSD is invisible to most users, and silently powering much of the internet they use every day. Which OS are you running right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Tech Reporter for more videos like this.